Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Commissioner. This has been a year of complex negotiations, lengthy, difficult negotiations, but it's been a year of necessary negotiations, Commissioner, to allow the Parliament to finally arrive at an ambitious, strong proposal, firm proposal to improve on the text proposed by the Commission, which, as we've said again and again, had many shortcomings. It was based on a structure that was entirely unconvincing. Commissioner, colleagues, we know now is the time to show ambition. We're facing major challenges: climate change, increased global competition. In the light of this, we cannot simply lie low. So the new CAP has to contain clear targets linked to the objectives that we've taken on here in the Parliament on the environment and the fight against climate change, as we've heard this morning. We want an agriculture that's socially and environmentally sustainable. That is fundamental to ensure fair, equal growth in our continent and globally. We know that. However, these high ambitions have to be nurtured together with the farmers, together with the branch. It absolutely cannot be imposed top down. That's the crucial element here. So I think that the compromises that have been achieved do take this on board, which, as far as we're concerned, is decisive. And these compromises contain the priorities that have been expressed by the majority of this Parliament. On the horizontal regulation, in particular, I think the compromise we've reached is a clear signal on the part of the Parliament. The Parliament believes it's mistaken to renationalise the CAP. As we've said again and again, we've tried to mitigate this unbridled flexibility that was granted to Member States initially. And instead we've come back to a system of controls and payments based on compliance, whilst at the same time, because we believe that we also have to look at delivery and results when it comes to such a huge public investment, we've also kept in some performance controls in two phases, one an annual and one a twice annual, at different intensities, nevertheless with stricter conditions on the Member States. President, we think that this has therefore struck the right balance between the certainty not to lead to inequality and competition between European farmers, whilst maintaining the common nature of this policy and the controls about how the monies are spent. We should never forget, after all, that this policy means that all European citizens can continue to have high-quality food on their tables. And the last issue that I'd like to mention is social conditionality. I know I've run out of time, but I believe this is absolutely essential. We've put this in the text, and it's very important. Thank you, President.
Thank you very much. We will try once again to give the floor to Mr. Kalinowski. We will see if he manages to connect or not.
Well, thank you very much, President. I hope we can manage this time. Let me start with direct payments, which to this day are the major instrument for revenue support to European farmers. But the level of direct payments is very diverse in Europe. The direct payments depend on production in a given country 20 years back. So I think it is high time to do away with this abnormality. So, ladies and gentlemen, once the changes we are discussing now have been introduced, more and more environmental objectives will be reached. But for this to be possible, we will need to eliminate one more problem, which is, in many countries, direct payment beneficiaries are not farmers but landowners. In Poland, for instance, as many as 70% of people are in this category, which is why I think what is extremely important is the definition of a farmer. So farmers need to be beneficiaries of direct payments, and the farmers will win, as well as the environment, which we cherish so much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dessel is next for 2 minutes. President, Commissioner, colleagues, I was a farmer long before a member of Parliament. I love my job. I've been actively engaged in defending it for years. This discussion on the CAP that we have this morning is of particular importance. I very much regret that we can't have a calmer debate given the current health crisis. The CAP reform we're about to vote on is not perfect. There are still fights that will have to be had or battles waged in the next review. But I think there are some groups that simply criticize without substance. They spam, they engage in personal attacks, and I think you have to recognize here what is based on common sense. Tomorrow's CAP will be greener. It will help those that have already made efforts to transition. It will benefit those who have not yet embarked on these changes. A more environmental CAP will not be possible without providing better financing. So we have to defend these tools, these instruments, to protect our farmers in years to come. I count on this Assembly and on the trilogue together with Commission and Council to show as much ambition on the environment as to aid for young farmers, for example, and for active farmers. The whiter than white agriculture that some people want needs men and women that are earning a decent income. Thank you. Thank you very much. I give the floor to Mrs. Limmer, 2 minutes.
Nach 1,5 Jahren Untätigkeit ist es für mich.
After a year and a half of doing nothing, I don't understand why in the middle of the lockdown we wanted to have a vote on the CAP. There are more than 2,000 draft amendments on the table. This shows that in the committee it wasn't possible to work out proper amendments. So I'm not really speaking today to the MEPs in this sham debate, but to the citizens of Europe, should they by any chance be listening, because not many people do. If we look at how many farms have died off, we can see how successful the CAP has been. A lot of people need to have additional employment because they can't make a living out of farming families. I think of the past, and we need to look at what the Commission is suggesting. On the 19 pages, they're suggesting how to improve farming. The main point is most ambitious objectives for climate, and they want to interfere in the climate policy of the member states, and they require strategic plans. And one thing farmers are no longer allowed to do is to produce food. So the Commission is responsible for the dying of the farming. At the same time, we're employing, and we're importing a lot of food, and there are far more pesticides allowed in China than there are in Germany. And Germany is only interested in the presidency, and they're quite happy to have this distortion of competition and to have the farms dying off, thus losing German tax income.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eckhout. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Chair. Greetings from the Netherlands. Very important discussion we're going to have today and for the coming weeks and months on the future of European agriculture. And I think what is very important is that yesterday again it was once more confirmed by the European Environmental Agency how within Europe we are still losing biodiversity. And there is a direct link with our common agriculture policies and that loss of biodiversity. So this is the chance to fix it, to really link the CAP reform to the Green Deal, and how that possibility has been missed by the deal of Christian Democrats, Social Democrats and Liberals. Just go through a couple of these measures. First of all, there is this voluntary way of dealing with eco-schemes. So it's voluntary, but if you then look how you can comply with it, we come to very vague terminology like you need to have actions to improve the sustainable use of pesticides. What does that mean? Almost any measure will comply with these eco-schemes. It's not meaningful at all. This, on the other hand, the price we pay for that is that we are weakening even the general conditions, weakening the proposal of the previous Commission that did not even link it to the Green Deal. So that's another very clear example that we are just copy-pasting non-functioning conditions from the previous time to this time. And then on top of that, we are even stating that the direct payment should be at least 60%. With that, capping the possibilities of countries to go further on greening. And on top of that, no link at all with the farm-to-fork strategy not being made. You know how weak this deal is. You know it very well. That's why you do all the tricks now to influence the voting list and to make it as early as possible, because you know that the deal is weak, and the more it will be scrutinized, the more people will doubt on it. So therefore, dear progressive forces in Renew and Social Democrats, follow your own voice and don't follow this crappy deal that is missing the opportunity of linking this CAP reform with the Green Deal that is so badly needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Yurgiel for 1 minute.
President, Commissioner, we are concluding our work on the CAP for the period 2021-2027. The support as part of CAP, according to the treaty, supports the income, the market and the rural development. Unfortunately, the division of funds that has been proposed for years maintains very unfair differences in direct payments to farmers in various member states, and this is detrimental to the interests of farmers in the so-called new member states, including Polish farmers. According to the Polish Parliament, this goes against the principle of non-discrimination. Article 18 of the treaty, as producers within the European Union should not be discriminated. And then Article 40, paragraph 8, which says that differences between agricultural regions may be taken into account, however, not the differences between member states. Such discrimination is a threat to the future of agriculture in some of the member states, and in particular in Poland. This is why I would like for all of us to reflect. So, rule of law, yes, but there should be non-discrimination as well as a principle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kokelis. Thank you very much, President. This Parliament supported the Green Deal by a large majority. It's clear there is a need to transition to a more fair and sustainable food production model. Today we need to vote on the CAP reform. If we do not integrate the Green Deal objectives, then what kind of transition will we have? How can we protect farmers that are so dependent on the climate? Will we simply close the door on the hopes of our farmers? How can we guarantee our food security? What will we do to stem the loss of biodiversity? How will we protect the climate? Colleagues, today we are going to decide on a third of the EU budget, decide on the future of millions of people. But I think the basis for a decision is not acceptable. We need to work on a new CAP. We need to have the right negotiation procedures, open procedures. For Greece, the farm to fork strategy is important, as is a good CAP, in order to ensure food security and healthy food. Let's do what we need to do. Let's do what is good. Thank you very much. As you know, this is the first time that members of the European Parliament have the possibility to speak remotely as well from the European Parliament liaison offices in the member states. And we have this innovation in the working of the European Parliament. It is also there to protect vulnerable colleagues from corona. This has been working well up to now. It shows that we can guarantee the good functioning of our democratic institutions and at the same time to protect society when faced with the risks of this pandemic. I give the floor to Mr. Nikola Avalanos for 1 minute. The EU is pursuing an antisocial strategy, and now we're seeing what's really happening, adapting to strategic priorities, so concentration of production, the greening, digitization and development of precision farming. These are conditions that seek to increase labour productivity, of which capitalism benefits. So the EU then could be more competitive with respect to other large structures. But as usual, it's farmers who always struggle who are paying the price. They're seeing their farms and their animals being lost in natural disasters because they've been abandoned. They're having to sell below market price to large chains, large agro-food giants, and they depend on subsidies to be able to survive. The capitalist path of the CAP and competition of the governments is simply exacerbating problems of small-scale farmers. But farmers have to get together with workers to fight against the common enemy, the European Union, against governments, against monopolies, for guaranteed price, for a dignified revenue. Thank you very much. Mr. Buda, 1 minute 30.
Politica agricolă comună asigură protejarea intereselor.
Thank you. The CAP is a matter of defending the interests of farmers and consumers. At the same time, we're in a world which is constantly changing, and the CAP must also take account of the challenges of today. It must lead to greater flexibility to take account of local conditions and needs. And at the same time, we must have member states stand together. We have to come up with new conditions for the farmers. Farming is very important when it comes to combating climate change and avoiding damage to the environment and to maintain landscape and biodiversity. And as we can see, it's also very important to meet the social and economic challenges that this gives rise to. So the CAP needs to find an answer to all these problems inter alia to make sure that the populations are covered, and it's a real challenge for the young people. We have to make sure that those challenges are met so that we can have food security in the future. Research should be a priority so that the European farmers can adapt to more stringent conditions. The CAP is a cooperation between the European society and the farmers in Europe. The food industry is such that we can ensure millions of jobs and at the same time ensure that we have food production.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Castro. 3 minutes.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, facing a real global emergency which we're seeing in ever-growing natural disasters which afflict our rural areas and our farmers, the request for a radical change cannot fall on deaf ears. To effectively face these emergencies, we have to have a common coordinated approach so that our farmers can improve on quality in providing environmental services to the benefit of everyone. Conversely, the proposed reforms of the CAP from 2018 gives major responsibility to the member states. It's effectively a renationalisation of European intervention for agriculture and rural areas. Therefore, as the Socialists, we have wanted to reopen the discussion on all three dossiers, despite the vote in Agri, a choice that we today are putting forward as an achievement given the major progress we've been able to make. So let me thank our negotiating team for the incredible work they've done based on the CMO dossier and then strengthening the market crisis measures and then transparency throughout the whole branch. And then the horizontal regulation. We want to safeguard the common element of the PAC, including the strategic plans. The strategic plans, however, I've been surprised by some campaigns of lobbies in the last few days against the work that we've achieved thanks to our efforts. These steps were unimaginable just a few months ago, and let me just give you one example. We want at least 30% of funds under the first pillar to go to eco schemes. This measure defined at European level which should accompany our farmers towards ever more sustainable production methods. We want to increase to 35% agro-environmental expenditure under Pillar 2 with a minimum of 30% for investment into sustainable spending in line with the Green Deal. And to align the CAP with these, we want a revision before 2030 of these strategic plans, or 2025, whilst not calling into question the economic dimension of the CAP. According to the treaty, this should improve productivity and support the incomes of farmers. We want a stronger, more competitive agriculture. We cannot ignore what our farmers and agricultural workers have done under COVID, sacrificing their own health to make sure that we have food on our plates every day. For this, we've worked on an ambitious compromise which can safeguard social, economic and environmental sustainability of the sector. More than ever, we are prepared to meet the challenges under farm to fork and biodiversity. But these shouldn't replace the CAP. They should go alongside it, guiding the 11 million European farmers to realising common objectives. Therefore, Commissioner, we should each shoulder our responsibilities, and the Commission should shoulder its responsibility to table specific legislation based on impact analysis, which we as co-legislators will look at and try to improve for our farmers, producers and all citizens of the Union. Thank you. Thank you very much. And now I'll give the floor to Mr. Cholos, Chair of Renew.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. What we are dealing with here is not enough to align the CAP with the expectations of our citizens, but it is a step forward. What we want is a common policy that creates a bridge between the rural and urban zones, between east and west, between local flexibility and common ambition. Agriculture requires a vision beyond just standards and administrative requirements. We need to send a clear message to our farmers to tell them that we need them, that without them there is no Green Deal. The Green Deal should be an opportunity for our society and for our farmers. When I look at the situation of our farmers who face drought, for example, other phenomena, who don't have decent incomes, we need to modify the CAP now. They cannot wait any longer. We need to look at the review clause as well in order to make another step forward. Any delay of these reforms would mean putting off by 3 or 4 years this new opportunity for farmers to move forward and adapt themselves to the new reality. Our thinking is a step forward in terms of the CAP, more respect for our natural resources, producing quality food at accessible prices. It is in all of our interests to maintain biodiversity, water quality, reduce emissions. When we look at the eco schemes, the investments that can be made for more environmentally friendly farming, to bring digital and innovation into farming, all of this means that nature and technology can be allied to create healthy food. Public policy for farmers, for the environment, it needs a total rethink, and we can't lose this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ciocca, 2 minutes.
Buongiorno, grazie Presidente.
Good morning. Thank you, President. If we had to ask workers, entrepreneurs, old people, young people, and to the sick, now that we have COVID, what they're expecting from Europe, what they expect from the Commission or the European Parliament, they want specific actions to save human lives and to defend jobs. And our agriculture can only go along this path if it's not penalised by European measures. With European resources, we can protect jobs within farming in the agricultural branch. With European money, we can defend agro-food products from our farming and defend and protect people's livelihoods. However, Europe, by producing insects, suggesting insects in our plates, we thought it was a joke at first. Europe is now thinking about how to promote synthetic meat, and instead of protecting and promoting our agriculture system in Italy, instead you're listening to the lobbyists of synthetic meat. I know there's a $1 billion worth of business behind this, but instead of standing firm and calling a steak, sausages, salami, hamburger what it is, instead you should allow that for denominations from the true meat sector, real animals, not those who want to deceive consumers with the complicity of Europe. I think this is absolutely fundamental. This is the way that we've got to move forward. So we shouldn't be deceiving consumers. Don't offend the current system. Don't adopt Nutri-Scores. Don't use denominations that are linked to meat to promote artificial synthetic meat. So no to measures that support laboratory meat, that support multinationals, but instead we want specific economic direct assistance for our farmers. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Weitz, 1 minute.
In der Tat ist heute vor allem die Industrie.
President, it's true that the industrial part of farming is part of the climate problem, whereas agriculture could actually be part of the solution. If we had organic farming, we could actually bind CO2 in our soil. And even if the we're trying to come up with, we're trying to pretend that a bad package is a good package. We should really step against climate change. Once again, we're coming up with a policy which gives the ruinous consumer prices and has farmers dying off. It's been clear for years that the rapporteur is against an upper limit of demands for farming industry. So again, we've got billions for the big farmers, and it's a slap in the face for the small farmers and environmental protection.
Thank you. Madam Aguiar, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. In recent weeks, I have received a lot of emails from environmental NGOs calling for more support, more ambition for the green architecture of the CAP. My response will always be the same. If agriculture isn't something which is profitable and competitive, then protecting the environment will simply be a utopian ideal. It's important to be ambitious but also responsible. Everyone here in this hemicycle needs to be realistic and needs to show common sense. Quite frankly, I cannot support the direction of this new CAP. I do not want to be complicit in this. We are creating a bureaucratic monster here. There does not appear to be any will to support young farmers with the necessary funding, and in particular, there is a rejection in producing food that benefits the environment. This is going to leave our farmers and our consumers completely unprotected when it comes to imports from third countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Hazekamp, 1 minute.
President, not even a year ago, Franz Timmermans introduced his Green Deal here. But how green is Europe? If this European Parliament is going to give 380 billion for more pesticides, more poisons, more toxic products, and less environment, we've got the consumers who are trying to use the car less and trying to take steps to help the environment, but at the same time we've got this massive support for beef farmers, which give rise to more emissions than all the cars, and we support bullfighting as well. Or rather, the EU is supporting bullfighting as well. The Commission is. I think we should do a lot better. We should say the meat industry should be cope on their own, and I think that CAP should be stopped.
Thank you very much. And now 1.5 minutes, Mr. Kolakučić. Mr. President, colleagues, the CAP, the policy and food production are the basis of Europe. The CAP is protection for consumers. We have to strengthen citizens in Europe and give them safe and healthy food, but we should also protect jobs in farming and agriculture. The current support system does the opposite. Throughout Europe, we can see many agricultural family businesses disappearing and have allowed some people to pocket vast sums of money and make huge profit from the CAP. In Croatia, 80% of the funds go to just a few companies. These are huge amounts of money with which you can purchase huge agricultural areas, which means we're going back to the feudal system of several centuries ago. But here we have regulations also covering fisheries, which allow us then for Croatia to be able to use fishing zones. But we also use fishing zones in Africa and Asia, and this is not necessarily good for the EU nor Croatia. Thank you. And now give the floor to Mr. Zoido Alvarez, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, President. Sometimes we become entangled in debates about symbolism here in Parliament and we forget what lies behind that. The CAP is not just a symbol. Behind this, there are millions of farmers across Europe. We are talking about millions of citizens who devote their lives to these rural areas in order to support their families and their livelihoods. Behind this CAP, we see the efforts of generations, the pride in the successes of your parents and your hopes for your children that they can continue to have this livelihood on the farm. The vote this week is not just any other vote. We are deciding on the future of millions of farmers and their families and creating quality food products at reasonable prices. Despite the cuts made by Council to farmers in July, there are still those who want to put more burden and more requirements on farmers. The Spanish Popular Party is the party of farmers and we are never going to abandon them. We will not accept such a radical change as is being proposed by such a successful model that the CAP has been up to now. The Common Agricultural Policy has for decades been the key pillar of European construction, and the European Popular Party believes that should continue to be the case. If we do not have a strong CAP in Europe, we will simply have much less Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schiedl.
Herr Präsident, verehrter Herr Kommissar, werte Damen und Herren.
President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, the Environmental Agency said yesterday that nature in Europe is under threat and biodiversity is being lost all the time. Alongside the change to the climate, this is a dangerous mixture for the future, and we in the MEPs must take measures in all areas where we have responsibility, and we must try and counter this, including and above all in agriculture. We need to look at how agriculture should develop in the future. The biodiversity strategy and the Green Deal or the farm to fork strategy are not contrary to the CAP. Rather, they should be a strong part of the CAP. The same applies to animal welfare. Sustainability should be the heartbeat of the CAP, and farmers should be an active partner in this. This is why it's so very important that we can produce foodstuffs independently. We have a package on the table that the three strongest groups have agreed on, which is contrary to ecology. In the second and the third pillar, there's strengthening conditionality, and environmental monies must remain environmental monies and not be shifted from pillar to pillar. Over the next days, however, ladies and gentlemen, we have to support progressive amendments, and when it comes to the climate and protection of the environment, we must strive to get more protection. And my group, of course, thinks it's very important to not forget the social aspects. So we have to make sure that people understand that Europe is there for them. We need to help out. We must make sure that we don't have illegally employed rural workers that should not be part of the EU budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Christensen for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Agriculture is really important for green transition. The farmers are part of the solution, not the problem. I think that we need more agriculture, which is why the reform is so important. This is the greenest CAP we've ever had. I think we here should start our way forward, the way we fight for environment in the next decade. More nature, greater biodiversity, and one set of rules. We shouldn't just have grass, corn or mice. We should also have biodiversity. I hope that you will all support my amendment 1148. We need a complete CAP. So there should be a good connection between the Climate Act and our CAP. what we voted on earlier this month, I said we need to have better farming, the way we use it as carbon sinks. We need concrete proposals. And the capture of CO2 was something that was voted through with a great number of proponents. A lot of people voted for it. And there's a very big difference between how we farm, if it's in Cyprus, in the east, or in Finland, in the north. So there should be a diversity in our CAP. So we could still adjust to local situations. We want simpler rules in the CAP. That's what our farmers need. So I hope everyone will vote for a more sustainable future where farmers are part of this reform. Agriculture is the basis for their income, and we should give them this by voting for the greenest CAP ever. EU should show them where to go. That's the only way to reach climate neutrality by 2050. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Madison, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to mention 2 points during this 1 minute that I have. Firstly, climate neutrality, climate hysteria. Nowadays, even in this room here, nobody has been able to prove how much is temperature influenced if we close all the agricultural producers, all the factories, we stop any kind of CO2 emissions. Nobody has been able to prove how this influences global warming, and so it's very strange to hear that we fight for climate neutrality, but nobody here knows how this influences global warming or climate in the long term. This is a very two-faced speeches that I hear here. And secondly, inequality. We talk about solidarity, common markets, our CAP, but even now when we look at Estonia, we are a member state. We've been a member state for 16 years, but Estonian farmers get 1/3 of the support that German or French farmers get, but the market is the same, but we have these gaps. Is this the solidarity that we want to protect here in the EU? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. O'Sullivan, 1 minute.
Chair. Well, whoever decided to call this the CAP reform might like to check a dictionary. Reform would mean improving the current CAP and aligning the future CAP package with the European Green Deal. This CAP should be transformative. It's not. This CAP is regressive. The recent European Court of Auditors report clearly concluded that declining biodiversity on farmland is a major threat to both the environment and to farming itself. Rules and rewards shape behaviour and practice. CAP must continue to provide vital support to farmers, but that support needs to be both fair and targeted into a transition into improving farming methods that help to stop, not speed up, runaway progression towards mass extinction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Rechonova for 1 minute.
Good morning, colleagues. Greetings from Prague. The common agricultural policy is supposed to help the farmers, but also the environment for good quality of water and of our soil. We need that the diversity gets better, which is not the case now. Diversification is also goes hand in hand with the size of the farms. Here in the Czech Republic we have extremely big farms and our environment suffers. People say that the reform of farm subsidies could change, and the answer is capping the subsidies and giving more to small family firms. This is why I suggested a vote about introducing the cap, and it will help us very much, and I beg you, please support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McManus, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. And as an Irish MEP representing a mainly rural constituency, I was pleased to have had the opportunity to work directly on this CAP reform. However, I am very concerned and disappointed at this last-minute attempt by the centre ground to weaken the substantial reform of CAP that is needed. Farming families that I represent need to see a fair balance between a reward for producing food that we eat, looking after our environment, and an assurance of generational renewal. Therefore, major reform of CAP must include substantial ring-fencing of the redistributing payment, eco-schemes, a capping of payments at €60,000 and the delivery of full convergence. However, elaborate parliamentary footwork over the last few hours is severely limiting our ability to ensure democratic engagement in these proposals and will make delivery of these much-needed reforms much more unlikely. Thank you, Chair.